today, the First Lady, and she's expressed a desire to sing our song. So, here's how we do it. I hope Gary hasn't forgotten the tune. I hope you haven't forgotten the words. I hope I haven't forgotten the words. And I hope you haven't forgotten the words. One, two, three. Take me out to the ball. Me out to the buy me some.
The Monday Morning Quarterback on the 13th of August 2018 from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. As we normally do, we dedicate this to our late broadcast partner, Jerry Pippin. Jerry Pippin was a red state liberal, a man that had amazing foresight in political matters and had been a broadcaster for roughly 40 years or more. In radio and in TV also, and in various scenery production activities. He used to say that with the Affordable Care Act, known as Obamacare, that people had it, they would like it. And the problem is, you hear the rhetoric today from the Trump administration on the Affordable Care Act. Many of the people, Trump supporters, that do not support the Affordable Care Act are people that actually need the Affordable Care Act. Medicaid, the program for people that are quote-unquote low income. But there are all kinds of circumstances that involve Medicaid. Medicaid is a program that pays for many, many things, preventive medical attention, access, I should say, but not only that, for nursing home care, and that is one of the big items that it does for senior citizens that are in those types of environments, and also for assisted living. So in other words, there are a number of things out there, and we see in states like the Commonwealth of Kentucky, on the Blevin, the governor there has a waiver, and that's very important to understand these various waivers that the Medicaid and Medicare services can give. His waiver is for a quote-unquote work requirement. What that is meant to do, it is the sister/brother, whatever you want to call it, of the voter ID laws. The American nation existed since the 1900s, having elections without IDs, and there was very, very little voter fraud. Now, in some places there was more than others, but as a nation, very, very little. Some people point, say, to Chicago. But that in itself was not a situation that was there. Or LBJ's missing a vote box down in the Rio Grande Valley of Texas. Those kind of situations are few and far between. But the whole idea there is the more types of administrative roadblocks you have, that prevents people from voting, and it also discourages people from even attempting the process if they do not have the proper identification, or if they feel that they don't have the proper identification. Now, when you talk about millenniums, since the 80s, people automatically have identification at birth, called the Social Security number, and with that they can get their birth certificate, driver's license. They have these things. People in their late teens and 20s in many parts of the country do have that type of identification because it's required by law enforcement, required by banks, you name it. People have it. So that's becoming less of a problem. So what they decided to do, well, okay, we'll prove the citizenship. Having a driver's license doesn't necessarily prove your citizenship. So now people are carrying around passports and all kinds of identification items. Because in this country we don't have, as in many countries, a national ID card. I can recall in university in the late 60s, early 70s, the talk about a national ID program based upon a universal Social Security number. But that was never done. Now we have what's called an authentic ID program. All of that brought in by quote-unquote 9/11, which was a suspect action to begin with, period. And all kinds of machinations around that particular situation. But where we are, in this broadcast, we'll talk about Boss Walker. He is the Republican boss of Wisconsin that is running for re-election in Wisconsin, that has recast himself from the old Boss Walker, the anti-tax Boss Walker, to call himself the education governor, providing more jobs. Of course, he's criticized for that plant down by the Illinois border that cost the state of Wisconsin billions of dollars in a very tenuous enterprise with ho-hum industries, they used to be called. We'll also look at the alt-right to protests across the street from the White House. And we'll go to the public news service and look at some wildlife concerns out in the state of Montana, a wildlife fund there, and also medical care in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Some of the stories we'll be covering here. Firstly, Tiger Woods came in second in the golf tournament in St. Louis, Missouri. And also with the Cubs, an interesting situation there. Look at my notes here. 450 feet home run by Mr. Bodie, and it was a walk-off home run. The Cubs were down by 3 in the bottom of the 9th inning, and they were literally down to their last out. And Mr. Bodie hit the grand slam, and the Cubs won the game by a score of 1. We'll get to that when we do the sports. That just sort of shows very interesting situation there, how the stratagem was. The manager there of the Cubs elected to keep a pitcher in, and that particular pitcher, I don't remember his name now, he was new to the Cubs, and gave up a 2-run homer. That can happen, and it did in fact happen. What they were looking for was a ground ball there, and it didn't materialize. They got the ground ball, but unfortunately for the Cubs, the Nationals were able to execute and scored 2 runs. And then they scored a 3rd run off of another relief pitcher there. So this sort of shows how baseball has a little bit of skill, serendipity, all thrown into one. This goes also into the political contest. Some candidates are just simply luckier than others. They don't draw opponents, or there are events that reshape it. We're looking. We did a special invite you to look at it on the Minnesota gubernatorial primary with the Democratic Party, which is known as the DFL Party in Minnesota. And the breaking news there on the congressman there that's retiring, Ellison, Keith Ellison, that's running for Attorney General. And we'll look at that allegations there of domestic abuse. These things are very suspicious when they come about in the last hour. Mr. Ellison has ran for congressional office every 2 years. I believe he's a 6-termer there, or at least a 5-termer in the Congress. And this comes out in the last few days of a gubernatorial race that he could possibly have won. This is the Democratic nomination. So a bunch of machinations around there. Let's go to the alt-right .2 event across from the White House there. There were 20 or so people, and looking at the event, we just call it an event, they were very few people there. There were few on stage. The organizer, creator of it, Kessler, and we did a special broadcast on that and invite you to listen to it. We even have old Kessler himself speaking there. We have people from the anti-racist protests and Go Home Nazis, No Trump, No KKK, No Fascist USA, and Black Lives Matters, etc., all rolled into one. So thousands of people there, hundreds of police types to keep things, the people separated, right across the street from the White House. And this is an interesting situation there. They came into Washington by train, and we entitled our broadcast on Sunday, Mr. Lee's Train. And the reason we did that was that we wanted to contrast Robert E. Lee's train with Mr. Lincoln's train, and that was a train that Barack Obama took from Philadelphia to Washington, D.C. We also did a broadcast there, and you can look it up. It's somewhere in the ISS feed. It was over at Blog Talk at the time, and it's still there, Mr. Lincoln's train. One of thousands of broadcasts we've done over the years. It's particularly chronicling the years in the campaign of Barack Obama, historic campaign in 2008. We were out on the campaign trail much of the time there in 2008. It was a historic event. But this event here was a different type of event. These, now they call themselves, they used to be just civil rights workers. Now they are quote-unquote white civil rights advocates, workers, whatever they want to call themselves. They were on the train coming into Washington on the last car, literally. So as the subway rolled into Washington through Foggy Bottom, where Hillary the Monster Clinton used to hold court, they got off at the next, I believe, subway station and came up the escalators. Of course, they were greeted by protesters. And the police, hundreds of police, had a line there to keep those people separated. If you look at that and go to that broadcast, excuse me, you will find the little speech by Kessler. There was also a Palestinian there that addressed the protests of thousands of working people, people of color, millenniums, you name it, were there. Mapping, we call that mapping in IT, like drives the Palestinian genocidal situation in the Zionist state to what is going on in the U.S. with the alt-right people. It's basically the same situation, and you'll hear him also in that particular situation there. And also a reflection on the status of race in the upper Midwest state of Minnesota. That coincides with the gubernatorial campaign of the DFL party. A professor from the University of Minnesota, Dr. Keith Mayer, brilliantly outlines the situation. Now, and this also ties in to the Democratic Party. He talks about a centralist party that was begun under Bill Clinton. And because of that type of party, you left the racial question behind, sort of like the white supremacists were left behind on Mr. Lee's train. And in that particular area, the Democratic Party of the Democratic Farm Labor Party, the one of Hubert Humphrey when he was the mayor of Minneapolis in the 40s, went to the Democratic Convention and brought with him a civil rights plank. But that is not anymore. They shifted and de-emphasized racial equality. They went to equality, but they de-emphasized racial equality. Now, as Mr. Stout would say, the author of the Nero Wolfe series, they're in a hole. And they are in a hole because the problem is the society has changed. And you have those states of Minnesota, Wisconsin, it's basically Milwaukee where progressives are, and also in Madison there. But there hasn't been attention to racial equality where you have large numbers of African Americans, primarily in Milwaukee. But this whole demographics is changing in the Twin Cities area of Minnesota and over the state of Minnesota. And that in itself calls attention to these parties and what has happened even in the progressive community. There has not been the attention to anti-racist platforms, period. And that used to be the case and still is in the environmental movement. You don't hear as much about the environmental movement these days because the microphone via Twitter and DJ Trump has drowned some of these people out, and they've been now folded into the quote-unquote resistance, where we do talk about all of these groups as one. If you listen to Friday Jobber, Madonna does a very good segue to today, talking about if any group out there, doesn't matter who they are, they can be GBTs or whatever, African Americans, women, are under, the target is on their back, period, in this particular time in America. So what has happened here, these people were down in Charlottesville, Virginia, the home of the Crystal Ball, University of Virginia, the school that Thomas Jefferson built, basically speaking, and the murder there of Heather Heyer, and we always dedicate every Friday Jobber to her when we do the Crystal Ball. But their importance has been dwarfed. And as we move to Boss Walker, we'll talk about the Tea Party elements in Wisconsin and what's happened to them there. And is this a lessening of that type of environment? Yes, and what's happened there is the same thing happened to the white supremacists. When DJ Trump incorporated these characters into his campaign, they became less of a factor overnight. That was why Bannon, when he was vanished from the White House, was vanished. And he was vanished from Bird Bar. And now he's running around as an independent operator, but he's a multi-millionaire, so he can run around. But these other characters here, you will not see an alt-right second anniversary of Charlottesville, because no one will be showing up. That is the point right there. So what this means for progressives is this is a time to continually organize block by block, literally, and run progressive campaigns, which includes health care for all. It doesn't matter what you call it, Medicare for all, health care for all, single payer, etc. And fortify the Affordable Care Act, keep it going, and at the same time move for more equality economic equality. Those are the things that people actually care about. Let's move to Boss Walker, and he's running for the third time in Wisconsin, a picture of old Boss here standing there. This is Oshkosh, Wisconsin, where Walker was. He was one of the biggest stars. This is the Washington Post here. And the Tuesday primary in Wisconsin also primary challenges to Walker again in November. This is a crowded Democratic field. The governor has struggled to find his path in a fast-changing GOP. And this is one of the things. Boss Walker tried to use Wisconsin as his model to run in the 2016 contest. But DJ Trump disposed of him, period. Trump, of course, is the first Republican Party candidate since Reagan to win Wisconsin. Walker's taken now to call himself the education president, provoking outrage from Democrats who noted he oversaw years of stagnant funding for public schools. He has largely abandoned his slam on the Affordable Care Act of President Barack Obama. He rarely mentions one of his signature achievements, the passage of the controversial 2011 law that shattered public workers' union power. In 2014, we reacted to what people were asking about then, and 2 years ago, we began listening sessions in every county, according to Walker. Well, he's listening because he's by the shoestring there. Wisconsin's working again, he told a crowd of 36 steel workers in Milwaukee. Well, there was a time when Wisconsin was not working very well, and DJ Trump pointed that out in the presidential campaign. There was past races, the recall effort there, and he narrowly prevailed after building a support from a coalition of suburban professionals, farmers, and factory workers behind his message of keeping the budget lean. Now, this is interesting here. These suburban professional types, farmers, factory workers, basically the same thing that DJ Trump's tried to do. He also pushed Wisconsin to the forefront of national focused Republican causes, including vote identification laws, voter suppression, loosening of environmental regulations. In April, after Democrats won a hard-fought race for the Supreme Court, Walker tweeted that he was likely to face a blue wave this year. More recently, he's blasting donors with appeals, citing a 13-point lead for a Democratic challenger. The Republican Governors Association has reserved $5.1 million in TV ad spending there. Last month, the Democratic Governors Association was able to throw in $3.8 million in airtime. So a battle of the waves there. This the first year he's running in a midterm with partisan national headwinds against him. That is from Charles Franklin. He's director of the Marquette Law School poll, the premier survey in the state of Wisconsin. He doesn't have President Obama to fight Republicans like to light Republicans like in previous just my lights here races. And if those national forces cost him just 1 to 2 points of the vote, he will be in a very close race. There's no doubt about that. A lot of it is who the Democrats run. In past races, Franklin noted that the electorate was evenly split between voters who prioritized education and those who favored cuts in local property tax. Now just 60% of Wisconsin voters favor about that spending on education, and 35% are still with property taxes. Bill Donald veteran activist and publisher of the Wisconsin Conservative Digest, says shifting of public attitudes towards spending reflects a broader disintegration of states' Tea Party movement. And this is important there. You get this to alt-white at a peak in 2010. That was in the second year of Barack Obama's term. There were 143 Tea Party chapters. They had 150,000 members in Wisconsin. He said he doesn't think even one chapter remains active, no doubt about that. The Tea Party was a creation of a Republican consultants, and basically what they were able to do was a 2010 version of the Trump movement. They were able to work in state legislatures, the House, and congressional elections, and they were very successful at that on a no taxes policy, running against the Affordable Care Act, and using race baiting. So those were the things that they were able to do. But since there's no Barack Obama, the race baiting program has to change. Republican strategists say Walker's challenge will be finding a way to rally Trump voters, also recasting himself in the mold of a traditional Midwestern Republican governor who governs with a soft edge. Well, if he tries that, he can't be there. The message is invest in education and in jobs. That's John Schulze of the Wisconsin Association of Builders and Contractors. Some of Walker's critics are seizing on the issue. One union representing highway engineers have a bulletin board up. Pardon our potholes. Pardon our Scott holes. In other words, potholes. In recent week, Walker has blanketed the airwaves, taunting the breakthrough, the new mega plant, that's Foxconn, that's Ho-Hum Industries, down by the Illinois border, would eventually create 13,000 jobs. But Walker faces criticism for agreeing to a $3 billion subsidy, as we talked about when we came in here. And now he's touring in a bus. And he had a news conference, same thing, with the police department, talking about Democratic candidates would reduce incarceration rates. In return, this is to 90 style. This has just not started to happen. Warned 1,000 violent offenders would be released. That is not the case. They have great numbers in prisons throughout the land of non-violent offenders that were in the drug business, etc., and can be released. And the problem there is in many of these states the sheer cost. The cost is too much to them. So this is one of the big things he wants to keep people in, lock them up. That's a stratagem that has worked. I'm surprised he's not got to immigration yet, but no doubt he will get there. This is particularly in rural communities that are frightened. Now, many rural communities in Wisconsin and the upper Midwest that have, say, packing plants, that sort of thing, are dependent on immigrant labor to manage those plants and the well-being of the towns. There's no doubt about that. Now, we're also back here to casting Milan Mitchell. We followed him. He is a president of Professional Firefighters in Wisconsin, and he's running also for governor. He would be the first African-American governor. You can talk about a blue wave, but you can't just go up against Walker with the same old rhetoric. There's no doubt about that. The person that's running, Tommy Evans, he's 66 years old. They wonder if he is inspirational enough. And that has hurt the Democratic Party in the past. I recall when we had Walter Mondale, a person that was not a very good speaker, running against Reagan, and it was a walkaway. That in itself is not where you want to go. The challenge for the Democratic Party is now to bring in new leadership and leadership that will inspire. In other words, leadership that can articulate. and at the same time reconnecting with some of the old timers that are still around, that have fought the trench wars and understand the various political machinations. There is room for everyone to train the younger people. But training younger people doesn't mean that you can stick around till you're 80 years old and just die in office with no clear line of succession. I recall when at Ferguson they were talking about, like Jesse Jackson, well, these new leaders in the Black Lives Matter and various other protest formations had left Jesse behind. Well, Jesse is still go-trotting with around the globe with Parkinson. He's in high tech. He's here. He's there, and he's still in business. And many of those leaders have long since went out. Incidentally, we do have Michael Brown's mother and Miss McSpadden running next year for city council in Ferguson. So we are getting some new blood out there. Let me just move on here. We talked about Representative Ellison. This is out of a local newspaper there in Minneapolis, St. Paul, the Star Tribune. Now this involves a young man named Monahan, Austin Monahan. He's the son of some woman named Monahan that claimed that there was a domestic altercation when Keith Ellison was in a relationship with Monahan. She is an organizer for the Sierra Club and made numerous posts in recent weeks about being in an abusive relationship, and more boldly about the Me Too movement. Well, the Me Too movement is a very, very important movement, no doubt about that. But at the same time, the last 2 days in an election is very, very suspicious. Now, supposedly there was a video, and the video evidently disappeared. The Sun said he saw the video. We don't know what happened there. Very difficult to come to determination in this type of situation here with a Monahan type. She called it narcissistic abuse, including manipulation, lying, victim shaming. Well, in relationships, there many times is some of the old stuff, victim shaming, etc. These are some of the things that people resort to. But in political relationships, a little different situation there. Political couples, I don't know how political they were not, but at the same time, it's dicey. Let's just say that. We at this mic never go out and say that a victim of abuse is a liar when we don't know. And I suppose evidence that will come out here, reading the rest of the article. Ellison's ex-wife defends him, but again, she's his ex-wife. He's, of course, one of 5 candidates running for Attorney General. Period. And some of these candidates are trying to use it as a somewhat of an issue. And I was reading today, 50,000 people have already voted in that state in early voting. Will that affect their voting or not? No, but how many will come out there? According to this Karen Monahan, she said she was not ready to talk and was focused on her children and family. This is a difficult time, she says. This is kind of interesting there. And then they said, well, some group we never heard of said Ellison should resign from Congress. Well, he's only going to be there a few more months anyway. So she reiterated a statement Sunday afternoon. Every statement I made was true. You know you did this to me. Well, I've been given every opportunity. Wait a minute. To get help and heal. And now you are willing to say my son is lying. Well, we don't know. and continue to leak more texts, and just as others will believe him. Well, there's no doubt about that. There are obviously people will believe, people will not believe. If he loses a race, people will blame her for that, and it doesn't help very much, period. Monahan said on Sunday, some of the tweets between her and Ellison, one in which indicated that she did not go public when Ellison's son was running for city council. What the hell does that have to do with his son? Anyway, Monahan described a relationship, we already talked about the narcissism involved there. She said she offered him restorative justice and wanted him to seek some kind of counseling. I want members of our community to know that the behavior described does not match the character of, that's his wife saying that, of Ellison. And evidently there were some tweets also here. I read this earlier, and I don't see it now, but anyway, they were sent out. But no smoking a gun was there. And this is kind of thing we don't like to get into. Is same way there in Minnesota with Lori Swanson being accused of politicizing her office in the last days of her campaign for governor there. So these are sort of things that we see more and more every day. Let me move on here back to the public news service. This is out of the state of Montana, Helena, Montana. With less than 2 months before it expires, conservation groups are calling for a permanent re-notification of the Land, Water, and Conservation Fund, a program that has received bipartisan support in the past. Montana has received $600 million since the fund was put in place 50 years ago. It helps protect a wide range of landscapes, including the Glacier National Park, grizzly bear habitat in the Rocky Mountain front. So Montana Wildlife Foundation says the program is critical for outdoor recreation, which supports more than 70,000 jobs in the state. So Chadwick, he is the executive director of the Montana Wildlife Foundation. Montanans are going to be able to enjoy everything we love about the treasured state today, he points out. Montana's U.S. senators have full support of the funding there in most years, but we're not certain about at least one of those senators now. This is a congressional news service. We had to get this in. West Virginia's insurance regulations mean freedom, and these are people in West Virginia that could lose their insurance in the Commonwealth of West Virginia. This is Charleston, West Virginia. For many West Virginians with chronic medical conditions, insurance regulations mean freedom. But Republican legislatures who oppose the Affordable Care Act say that Obamacare insurance rules limit commercial freedom. Well, we're not worried about that. Jane Warden, she's of Charleston. Freedom depends on having health insurance. Warden was diagnosed with arthritis at 21. She has what's called a pre-existing condition. Patrick Morsi, he's the Attorney General there, joined a lawsuit led by Texas. Now, Texas and West Virginia states that a large percentage of their residents need the Affordable Care Act because they meet all requirements. The Affordable Care Act requires all insurance plans to cover 10 basic areas: emergency care, preventive medicine, and prescription drugs. The ACA also mandates insurance companies cannot drop someone for having a pre-existing condition or for exceeding an annual lifetime benefit limit. And these are things that people have to very, very closely examine. And this is something that doesn't happen in an emotional vacuum where people are not really looking at what's going on. We'll now do the sports. We already did a pre-run into it, talking about, for once, a second didn't sink for Tiger. Tiger wanted to win. There's no doubt about that. Brooks Koepler wasn't losing to someone, not even Tiger. And this is from ESPN, a big headline here with Tiger Woods in St. Louis. Tiger Woods delivered the victory first pump on the 72nd hole. It was hard right now there, and the people were following him. An old heavyweight from St. Louis by the name of Sonny Liston. I didn't know Sonny Liston was from St. Louis. Anyway, Tiger Woods finally said, the hell with it Sunday, and the hell with any entire career spent batting on second place. Tiger Woods was going to celebrate a loss for once in his glorious sporting life. He just made a 19-foot birdie that he knew in his heart wouldn't top Brooks Koepler. Then Tiger responded at his Belvedere here as if he had on his fifth Augusta jacket. So this is a story here, a sympathetic story to Tiger. That the Tiger is indeed back. Let us go now to the baseball scores from last night. And we'll see where baseball was. We already reported on the Cubs, but let's get the rest of them in here. This is the Monday morning quarterback. We're happy to have Tiger here. Nonetheless, the Red Sox were in Camden Yard. 4-1 was the score. Sox. The Rangers were in New York. The Yankees 7-2.
What he's doing back there is it's tough to beat. When a guy hits a 340 down the middle, that's tough. And you know what he did at Shinnecock, just bombing it. And then he's doing the same thing here. I played with him in practice round. He was literally hitting it 340, 350 in the air. And when a guy's doing that and hitting it straight, and as good a putter as he is, it's tough to beat. The people here were so positive. The energy was incredible. But
no doubt the energy in St. Louis. The Rays were in Toronto. Blue Jays at 2-1. The Twins were in the Motor City. Tigers 4-2. The D-backs were in Cincy and won the game 9-2. The Mets were in Florida. 4-3 was the score. Mets. The Brewers were in Atlanta. Atlanta 8-7. The line score here. Oh, this is an interesting thing. The Brewers had 19 hits and 2 errors. That was mentioned on the Cubs broadcast. And Atlanta had 9 hits and 2 errors also. So it was 8-7 score. Cleveland was on the south side of Chicago, 9-7 Cleveland. And in 10, the Mariners were again in Houston, Texas, taking on the Astros, and won the game 4-3. The line score, 11 hits for the Mariners, 1 error, and 7 hits and no errors for the Astros. Very interesting. The Cardinals were in Kansas City, cross-state rivalry there. Cardinals 8-2. Not really cross-state, but we look at St. Louis and Kansas City. Part of Kansas City, of course, is in Missouri, so I suppose it's chance to say. Nonetheless, the Dodgers were in the Mile High City, Rockies 4-3. Mr. Davis finally got a save. Wade Davis, who used to be with Kansas City, later with the Cubs. The Phillies and Padres down in San Diego. Padres finally win a game, 9-3 was the score, Padres. The Pirates and Giants in San Francisco. The Giants finally win a game 4-3. And the Athletics and Angels in Southern California was 8-7. The Oakland Athletics been doing pretty good. Mr. Fernando Rodney, who was just traded to Oakland, was the winner from Minnesota. And finally, the Nationals and the Cubbies in Wrigley Field. We talked about the walk-off home run by Mr. Bodie, 450 feet. I had to get my notes out here again. In the bottom of the ninth inning. It was a close game there. Mr. Wilson was a winner, and Mr. Matson was a loser. The line score wasn't much there. The Nationals had 3 hits, no errors, and the Cubs had 6 hits, no errors. There was a lot of hitting going on there. It was a well-pitched game up to the 7th inning. And then things sort of changed there. The Nationals were ahead by 1, and then they got the two runs. I was off, I guess, by a run. I thought they finally... anyway. So it was 3 runs for the Nationals and 4 runs for the Cubbies, and that walk-off home run. So it had 6 hits there, and that was in the bottom of the ninth. This does it for the baseball scores. Does it for the Monday Morning Quarterback on the 13th of August, 2018. We'll return on Tuesday. We'll be talking about more than likely about some more voters. We have the program Mr. Lee's Train that was on the racist protest. We wouldn't even call it a protest. It was an event when only 20 people, or less than 20 people, showed up for the so-called big event. They also had something down in Charlottesville on Sunday, on Saturday. There were no white supremacists to be seen, and heavily police present there also. So that's pretty much a shutdown of that particular effort there. But the political machinations go on. We had the people from Charlottesville and Remember and Have a Higher on Friday Jobber. Check out Friday Jobber on the RSS feed, on Stitcher, on the iHeart Radio. They have 800 plus stations in their app. Also on Spotify. The speakers, whether they be Alexa or various other Google Chrome, you name it. We are on those also. We're on we are also on various others. I think we're still on Apple also. We on YouTube. I was thinking of YouTube there, but I was thinking of some others there. Tune in. And there's just a whole lot of those out there. And at bostonred.org, we'll be updating that and put some players there and tell you exactly where we are. The Twitter feed, of course, is on Facebook. We have some information up there, particularly from the public news service and others. Have a good week, everyone. We'll talk to you next Monday morning.